Good afternoon, it's Jonathan Norman, and I'm recording an interview here with Dave Caulk around the principles of the Delivery Manifesto. Dave, did you want to start just by introducing yourself, and then I'll ask you which of the principles you'd like to talk about?
Sure. Good afternoon, Jonathan. Dave Caulk. I work for a major international defence organisation. I've been delivering major projects and programmes for about the last 25 years. This afternoon, I have picked collaboration as my topic for discussion, and just like to put some thoughts into you as to what that means to me and what it means to the organisations I've worked in.
Okay, and your reason for choosing collaboration?
For me, collaboration is a differentiator, clear and simple. It sets out a very clear and concise set of behaviours that both parties have to agree to prior to getting into the relationship. And it just bears fruit in terms of a shared vision that both parties can look at and agree that that's the right course of action. It talks about, for me, and again, it's more behaviours than it is actual policies and processes. But it's about standing shoulder to shoulder with your partners and working towards a considered, agreed goal and set of outcomes. And should difficult situations arise, then it's actually getting the right things done for both parties and worrying about the contract later. And that can only really come about with trust and just an honest and an open way of communicating and working with each other.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting that you talk about behavior because I agree with you. Collaboration is clearly all about behavior. But how does a project establish itself as a collaborative project? How do you set the whole thing up? How do you make it all happen in the first place?
Well, there's a number of things that you have to consider, and before you get into a collaborative agreement, I think it's really important to actually understand what it means to be in a collaborative or to be in a collaborative working relationship. And I think you need to go through some steps. And one of the models that we certainly use is what we call the 5 C's, which is from coercion to collaboration. So if you look at the very basic level, it's coercion, it's doing what you've been asked to do, and there's consequences of not doing it. You then move into the next stage, which is compliance, which is doing what you asked because you told me. You then move into coordination, which is working out with you what we do and when we do them, and then go and do them independently. And then we talk about cooperation, which is establishing a working pattern where we work together without challenge. And then we move into collaboration, which is ultimate goal. So it's working together for common purpose, mutual benefit, high challenge, high support, doing the right things because it's the right thing to do. So when you look at collaboration and you decide that that is the right level that you want to work at, then you need to make sure that your partner feels it the same way. And then to actually make that work, you have to really put some plans around that. And it's what we use is a relationship management plan, and we talk about a number of different elements in terms of the way we're going to behave, the values that we're going to share, how we would approach things like risk and opportunity, all of those kind of important things, and also an exit strategy as well, because you have to realize that not all relationships will make it. So what are the criteria where we have to say, okay, let's have a potentially just difficult discussion that says, this isn't going to work and we're not going to work in this way. Therefore, we need to part company. But the relationship management plan, certainly in my experience, is always a live document, something that needs to be looked at constantly, reviewed against your performance. So some kind of metrics to understand how you're sort of proving that you're working collaboratively is really important. And then there's really the key individuals that are party to that agreement, just absolutely operating in that open, honest, trustworthy approach that makes collaboration work.
That's really interesting. Do you see? I mean, traditionally, large organisations have had huge armies of people in their contract management departments. Do you see a move away from this kind of contract management towards relationship management, reflecting, as you say, this move from the coercive contract-driven relationship to the more collaborative arrangement?
I think my view is it will change in a number of different industries and different organisations. Some organisations will be much more receptive to working collaboratively, others won't. My hope is, as we sort of move forward, certainly as a profession, we move much more towards a collaborative relationship model rather than a purely commercial one. But again, you both need to be quite strong on what that actually looks like, because if you aren't strong and you aren't clear about it, then potentially one party can potentially take advantage of the other, and obviously that's completely opposite to working collaboratively. So again, it has to be the right thing to do, and sometimes it just has to be much more of a commercial relationship rather than a collaborative one, potentially.
Yeah. In terms of developing the capability, I can't remember who it was, but somebody said to me a while back that a lot of projects on which she's worked start very collaboratively. Everybody's really enthusiastic, and that, we're in the right space. We've got the correct culture, and then they contract the thing, and it all goes to hell in a handbasket. How can organisations develop the capability? I mean, they're moving from, and I like the model you've got, from the coercive to the relationship-driven environment. How do you start that process of building those new relationships?
Well, I think it's early identification of where is it appropriate to do it. As I said a minute ago, it's not all relationships are right for doing that. And again, a lot of it is down to the people and the organisations, and are people prepared to work in that open collaborative style? And not everybody is. So I think it's really important that certainly the program manager, project manager, and the seniors within the organisations have to live and breathe collaborative working. Otherwise, it will fail. And I've seen examples of it before where we started in a particular program to work collaboratively, and then the customer actually stepped back from that because they were uncomfortable working in that sort of open style, and they were much more comfortable working in a more traditional supplier-customer relationship governed by the contract. So we had to agree with that. The contract wasn't terminated. The two parties in that particular instance moved away from the relationship management plan. We mutually agreed that wasn't the right approach, and we just relied on a standard sort of commercial agreement.
A couple of the points that jump to mind is the trying to identify motivations for both, whether it's motivations or drivers or targets for the individuals, the functions and the organizations right up front. When you get a commercial versus a non-commercial organization, or I don't know, one organization that's very much driven by the need to be highly innovative, developing new products, developing new ways of working, while the other one is the exact opposite. They're trying to survive, and it's all about the bottom line. If you had those kind of conversations, I guess, up front, it's going to save an awful lot of heartache later when you realise, right, you just are not going to approach when something comes up the same as us. But
I think in that instance, it goes back to that shared values and shared goals as well. If you align those at the start, and even if it could be a variety of different organisations as you just described there, but if you have that shared vision and values right at the start, then actually most things can kind of fall behind that, I think.
Totally agree. And in terms of doing that, I know it's quite useful when I've done this in the past is actually specific examples. I think that you've said broadly the same thing, Dave, which is like, let's, use case is quite a formal way of describing it, but what happens if, or when this arises, let's not say that it's not going to arise, because it will. what do we do? How do we, what will you do? Will you pick up the phone, or will you pick up the email, or are you going to phone your lawyer, or what do we do? So it's almost like identifying those and talking about them up front, kind of a reasonable selection of them.
Yeah, I would agree. And one of the resources that I'd absolutely recommend anybody to look at is the Institute of Collaborative Working. You can find their information very easily online, and that they give you an overarching sort of process and areas to consider. And that place that unfortunately does happen occasionally, where you decide that actually exiting that relationship is the right thing to do. There needs to be some key triggers, some parameters around that are both agreed and understood up front. And again, it relies, I think, my personal opinion, it relies very heavily on the individual that's running that relationship to think, okay, what's the right way to communicate that this is, it's not working well. For me, that's very much using a personal relationship. That's not done over email. That's not done over Skype. It's actually much more about going and seeing somebody. Obviously difficult currently, but sitting down with them across the table and having that sort of discussion that says, look, we need to either reset this, or we need to think about changing the parameters of this relationship. What do you feel about that? And taking a very much collaborative approach to it.
And I guess the final point I'd just make was I worked with a wonderful woman. She was a professional coach and did some fantastic workshops with her. And what she always said was that when there's a high level of trust, when people can voice mistrust, or you can bring up conflict, or you can say, you know what, Dave, I'm a bit skeptical. Why did you do that yesterday? I'm now concerned about. I'm thinking, are you going behind our back? Or are you trying to go to the client and do this? So now somebody will go, oh my God, you can't do that in a relationship. Yeah. But it's actually a voice of. It just shows how much trust there is that if, let's say it was me and you, I could openly talk to you about that. And I know it's been. I know when I've gone into teams in the past, I've seen people when they've been talking like that, it's quite a shock, because you think it's like, my God, they are so open. They're talking about stuff that normally never comes up, and therefore it's not a negative thing. It's a hugely positive. So anyway, just
it is. And perhaps I could just touch on that. One of the things that we used to have in a previous organisation is what we called professional intimacy. So it's actually that level of building a relationship between the key people in that relationship to a level where you can have those kind of discussions, and that isn't fostered over a couple of weeks and a few phone calls. That is face-to-face time. It's about going beyond the bounds of just the particular project or program you're talking about, but understanding the person as a person, what makes them tick, and building that close business relationship. It's really important.